I'm going to do the demo tonight, and we're going to make wooden stemmed wine glasses. So the first one of these I made, my stepdaughter and her family, we were at Thanksgiving and they broke a wine glass and I said, give it to me. So I turned a stem and it worked, but it was ugly. Because the stem was anyway, the proportions weren't right. And so I've refined it, and these wine glasses that they were given to me, I have a friend that his wife went to an auction and she bought about that many of them. And I think these are a Pinot Noir wine glass. Anyway, these are marked as Wolfgang Puck. So anyway, but what you need to turn a wine glass is an old wine glass, need a stick, and a block of wood. The other place I get wine glasses is at Bed Bath & Beyond, and with a coupon, you can get a dozen of them for, I think it's $19.95, and then the coupons have changed, but 20% off so anyway, it works out and it's cheap. But the main thing you want to have is a wine glass that doesn't have too thick of a stem, because you'll see why. Anyway, so usually when I do these, I'll do a run of 12 and I'll do all the bases and then I'll do all the stems. That way you can keep using the same tools, your grinder's set up the same way, and it just makes it easier rather than going back and forth. So tonight I'm going to start off with the base. And I mill the mesquite with a bandsaw, and usually the blade is dull as hell and it doesn't cut very well. And anyway, you need a piece of wood that's about 5/8 thick. I have used them thicker, but it's just more to turn away. And you sort of, to keep the proportions the same, make sure that the base is about the same size. This is, I want to make the bases about 80 millimeters. So that's what I do. And sometimes I cut the corners off on the bandsaw, but most of the time I just turn it off. And so let's get started. Almost there. And then what you want to do is turn a small tendon on the end, and fortunately I have to use a hexagonal pencil, but if you place the pencil on there, that's about the size of the tendon needs to be. I think that'll hold. Oops. I hate when that happens. There. At home, I turn on a Powermatic and you can push it, but with this one, I'd probably turn it over. All right. Huh? No, it's not. So let me go ahead and get it fully round. All right, and then I'll face it off. All right, I want 80. That's close enough. The outside mark is for the diameter, and the inside mark is for the recess, because you have to turn it around. I lost my pencil. Huh? So anyway, you've got the diameter right, and now you want to cut a slight recess. So this is a homemade tool. It was an old 3/8 parting tool that I turned around and ground, and I used it like a dovetail to make a Okay, on the chuck that I'm using, the expansion, it has to be at least 52 millimeters. And check it before you take it off of there. So anyway, I've got it. Yeah, no. I've gotten to where it's like I sell a lot of them, and I get the word that I need more wine glass, and it's like, oh no. Anyway, check the flatness. You want it to be sitting on the outside edge. And if it's not, just nibble away a little bit. And then on the bottom edge, cut a little camphor. That just makes it look like it's lifted off of the table a little bit. And at this point, I would sand it. Sand it all the way through all the grits. And then the finish I put on it is CA glue. I wanted something that was fast and durable. I didn't want to have to, wipe on poly or tongue oil or lacquer, because lacquer will just go away with time. But the CA glue seems to work well. So anyway, that's the bottom of it. Yeah. It's my version of it. You just grind off the top edge and then grind it.
When you make a negative break, what are your angles?
I don't know here. Everybody is hung up on angles. Do what works for you.
Measure that and give us the answer. The reason I asked, Carter Tools sent out an email here 3 or 4 months ago. It said make the bottom 40.
And the top.
It's nowhere near.
No, it's not. I mean, if you're going to grind both faces, I think what is it? The included angle has to be less than 90. Less than 90, because if you come at 90, you haven't done a darn thing. So, anyway, and then turn it around and snug it up. And then you just want to lighting in here sucks. Just make a small gradual dome. And then you want to drill it. I've got a drill chuck here somewhere. This is a 1/2-inch Forstner bit that I had to cut down to drill a hole when I was repairing some furniture. And it was in a real tight space, so I cut the shaft off, and I haven't lost it yet. I'm going to slow this down. A variable speed lathe makes this a whole lot easier. Does Woodcraft have a variable speed?
Yes, they do. And they don't like to get it out for some reason.
Why?
They hide it.
It takes a whole lot longer for it to wind up too. That one at least is more responsive.
Anyway, this is awkward.
Look at it right, so we don't have to paddle the lathe blade.
Okay. Now, when you drill this, you want to pay it. You don't want to go too deep. You don't want to put a hole in all the way through the bottom. What I do is, oh, my scraper. That's okay. That's okay. Anyway, I said, damn, I'm going crazy. So anyway, and with these chucks, you have to remember which way to go to loosen and tighten. So anyway, so this would be the base. And before you take it off, you sand it and put the CA finish on it and then set it aside. So anyway, what's next is you want to turn the stem.
Do that all out of one piece instead of.
You could, but I mean that's a lot of wood. I mean you have to figure, you know, it might be quicker if you take into account the time you spend milling all the lumber and the aggravation that's involved with it. So anyway, if you don't have multiple chucks, there is a way you could do the stem part of it, and I'll try to get what I do with it. That was it. And on the stem, I use a cone center because after you drill it, it gives you a way of supporting through the drilled hole.
What size block is that?
It's about a one inch block. So anyway, mark the center on one end.
Where do you sell your wine glasses?
Retail or wholesale? Retail, An individual wine glass is $37.50, or a pair for $70. So anyway, and then using the biggest gouge you have. Huh? No, that's the biggest one. Anyway, let me speed this back up. I bought this shortly after I first started turning, and because I thought I needed it. Anyway, this is called a continental roughing gouge, and they say not to use this. This is a spindle tool. They say not to use a spindle tool in bowl turning. I break the rules because it hogs wood out.
You in your shop, no one knows.
And then cut a tendon to hold it with. Tenon. The on-off switch is in the wrong spot. I have a little Delta MIDI this size, and the on-off switch is up here, so I keep going.
How old are they?
What? They're old. I mean, yeah. I like them. They get gummed up and they get a little hard to operate, but if you take them apart and clean them out, they get to working better. So anyway, go ahead and get it rest of the way around. Homemade parting tool. So you want to square off the end. And what you have to do is figure out how long to make the stem to keep the proportions about the same. What I came up with was 96 millimeters. So figure out 96 make a mark. Half of that is 48. Make another mark. Okay, now you need to drill it. And what you have to determine is how long to make this. You want the stem long enough that it's going to have a little holding power, but not so long. I mean, this is a stylus stem I turn. You can turn any style you want. Because if you have a real long stem and it sticks down way down into the taper, that wood is going to be really thin. And it's not going to make it. So anyway, I figured out, and what I do is what I do with it. Figured out, and I cut a piece of paper that I take and I hold. Let's go ahead and cut this. If you look at the glass, you can see a shadow where the actual bowl turns, and make a mark. And then with a triangular file, just score it.
Those stems pretty much universal.
What?
They're all the same size.
No, they're not. It depends. The ones I buy at Bed Bath & Beyond, they're actually larger diameter than this. Anyway, and then touch it with a little spit, and there it is. No, no, it's magic spit. So anyway, and then eventually, these are all held together with 5-minute epoxy. I take a little diamond. They sell these here. You can also buy them at Harbor Freight. They're really cheap. And I just put it in the Dremel and turn it on and rough it up. And that just gives the epoxy something to bite into. The epoxy will stick to the glass, but it'll stick even better if you have something to give it some bite. So anyway, we need to drill this now. And when I first started making, what you have to create is a tapered hole. And before, when I first started doing it, I was using up to 3 drill bits to get it done. I would drill one to depth, and then one a little bit bigger, a certain depth, and then another one bigger to get to fit the stem in, so it will sit right. And for the Bed Bath & Beyond wine glasses, I can drill it out with a 3/8 Forstner bit and then come back with a unibit. These you can get Harbor Freight really cheap, and if they start to get a little dull, just take a diamond hone and rub it on either side. Now, let's slow down. Yeah, I need to drill it, but at that speed, it would not be pretty. No. I have a 1/4 inch Forstner bit that I could use to drill it to depth, but it's just a smidgen too small to accept this. So what I did was this is a 5/16 brad point bit that I ground the tip off a little bit. So anyway, but I will drill it with this first. This sucks. Let's see how this works. And you have to clean out the stuff. Do what? Yeah, I'll finish that. I'll show you that in a minute. Anyway, I have it this marked for how deep I want to go in with this one.
Where did you get this wine glass that you're using tonight?
A friend of mine gave it to me. His wife went to an auction. It was a clearance auction, and a lot of wine glasses came up, and she bought them. And I think he said she bought 65 of them. It was such a deal. HEB sells some cheap wine glasses, but the stems are too big. Too big a diameter. They don't have enough small enough taper on them. And then I have the final depth marked with a piece of painter's tape. And that's
Hold the drill bit up to where you can see how far in it goes compared to the line you have.
yeah, what I do with it. Oh, that's right. That's right. Anyway, here's the stem, and so it'll go. There'll be enough room for it, and it's a good idea to check. And at home, I have a air compressor. Blow the shavings out, and then put it in and see how it. Make sure it's going to fit. If it doesn't go in so that this seats firmly on the opening, then you need to drill it a little bit deeper.
Approximately, what's the diameter of that?
It's less than a quarter.
Even on the good ones you bought?
On this one is about 6.5 millimeters. So the ones I buy at Bed Bath & Beyond, like I said, I can drill it to depth with a 3/8 Forstner bit and then come back with the unibit and open up the hole so I get the taper. And an advantage of this is that you can see the steps in there. And when you glue this in, the way you glue it in is after you glue this to the base let that cure, and then glue the glass into the stem. And for the longest time, I would add too much epoxy. And as I put the stem in, the epoxy would rise and come out the side. And so I would see it rising up. I'd pull it off and then wipe it off with a paper towel and then go back in. But with this, you see, it's almost like a graduation. So you can fill it up with epoxy to a certain step. Here, I'll pass it around. And the stem will go in, and you'll be good, and you won't have the spill out. No. Usually, what I do, I clean off my bandsaw table, and I set, because it's at a nice height, and then I use the blade guide as a straight up and down. I mean, I'll glue it in, I'll set it, I'll look at one way, then I'll walk around the other way and make sure that, and if it's tipping one way, after you drink enough wine, you won't really matter. Anyway, you need to support this end. Do not put it in too tight or you will split it. And speed it up again.
Do you make the end that's going up against the glass concave at all? How do you get a nice tight fit to the bottom of the glass?
Well, it comes to an edge, and I mean, I don't put a concave in it. Most the glasses, it should be concentric, and it should sit. These wine glasses, these are really I think these are really good wine glasses. You can just tell from the sound of them. The Bed Bath & Beyond wine glasses are not that good. And you can tell that they were made in a form, because where the stem meets, you can see it's kind of globby. And I've had some of you set them in, and it's got a rough spot, and I'll take a file and smooth it off. So anyway, on the stem, this diameter, I set it to 21 millimeters. This is set to about 23 millimeters. And in the middle, I shoot for about 9 millimeters. If you go much smaller than that, the curve you have here, if it's smaller than 8 millimeters, it takes it into no wood, and it ends up being thrown away because you cut through the side. And hopefully I won't do that tonight. So mesquite. What? I've turned some with a maple base and a pink ivory stem, and I've turned maple base, walnut stem, walnut base, maple stem. And so anyway, usually I have 2 sets of calipers when I'm doing it in, I'll call it production. I didn't do a darn thing. Where's my knob to turn the speed up? And then cut this down for the tenon to glue into the base, and I use a 1/2-inch wrench to size it. It gets it close. You need to check it before you part it off. And then the back end, 23.
The dimension, you just figure them like, keep on doing it right.
Excuse me?
That 21 on one end and 23 on the other one.
That's just something I arrived at. I mean, it's
Kept on going to
1 millimeter either way is not gonna make that big a deal. And then you bring this down in the middle. Huh?
Looks so thin.
Something like that. That's 10.
You wear your cap like the kids do, backwards, that way we can see what's going on.
It's right at 9. And then put a mark in here. Then on this end, cut a little chamfer. Like that. And then do the same thing here. And you want to get rid of all this wood in the middle. And when you're doing this, don't run into this side or it'll get exciting. What? That's good enough. Now to do the final shaping, I use a spindle gouge. If I owned a good skew, this would be an excellent place for it, but since I don't, I don't. So anyway, what you want to do is just make a small a gentle curve. Sometimes this goes really well, other times it takes me way too long.
A whole lot easier than them, so have a lot of people look at it.
In 2 months, James Carter's gonna do a demo on skews for the paint plug.
I can use the skew all day long if it doesn't matter. But as soon as it matters, I don't know what it is. Anyway, at this point, sandpaper can be your friend. Let's try this. Let me see what. I'm going to leave well enough alone. So, anyway, and at this point, you would do all your sanding and put the finish on. And once everything's finished, you're ready to part it off. Now, I said that I gauge the length of the diameter of the tenon with a 1/2-inch wrench. Anyway, check it before you part it off, because there's nothing worse than not having the hole big enough or your tenon too big. And then check the depth of it. Do I have another? Another homemade parting tool with a duct tape handle. So anyway, that's that. And then you glue it in, and there's your wine glass.
Oh, beautiful.
So anyway, sandpaper can't, huh? Just 5 minute. I buy it at Lowe's. That I think it's made. I think it's it's made by JB Weld. I've used it. Doesn't seem to be as yellow, but it doesn't seem to cure as hard as the other epoxies I've used. But anyway, and then to glue the stem to the base, just put a little bit in there because again, you don't want to have a bunch of squeeze out, and you'll get a feel for it by, you know, if you put it in and then it's just barely there and then you push and it goes in, you're okay. And a little bit of epoxy, people aren't going to be looking at it. And then again, the amount of epoxy to put in here, I usually mix up. I dispense the epoxy I use. It's a polypropylene syringe. It doesn't have a rubber plunger. And I dispense it out of the syringe and I mix up 2 mils at a time. And I put it into a certain mark and then you just lower it. And if you see the epoxy starting to rise above, you know that it's going to squeeze out. Pull it out, wipe it off, and then go back in. And then let them sit, figure out, you know, it would make sure they're fairly straight. I mean, it would look kind of ugly if, you know, if they were, these sit well, but some of the other wine glasses, because they have lumps in them up here, it doesn't sit well, so you have to prop them up against something. I guess I could build a right angle thing and do that, but that's just another piece to put somewhere.
But you don't get the one that has a bead right at the base, right?
No. So anyway, I'm going to put a pair of wine glasses in the bring back raffle. So you can auction them off individually or as a pair. It's your call. So where's here? Any questions? Yeah, let me have that.
Put on a layer of thin CA first and then the medium.
No, I usually do it. I put 2 coats of thin on, and depending on the weather like this, it won't cure very fast. But if it's humid, it will cure. I wait till it gets cured. Otherwise, if it's wet and I hit it with accelerator, if it's still wet, it'll make. There's a term for that. I can't remember what it is. Yeah, it'll bloom, and then once I hit it with accelerator, I have a paper towel in my little cubby, and I just wipe it off, and then I put 2 more coats of thin and call it a day. I don't shine it. I don't do it. I mean, it looks. I'm sure that if you held it at the right angle, you could find where it's not perfect. But again, after a couple of glasses. Oh yeah, these are not dishwasher safe. What? Yeah.
Do you notice any preference from people with a different color top bottom?
No, there was no preference. It was interesting, and so I thought I'd give it a shot. The wood was free, and so I got tired of looking at mesquite. Yeah.
Your bases are close enough to the original to where they'll fit in the overhead racks.
Yeah, they should. That's another. I mean, and if you make these and you break them, don't throw it completely away, because you can salvage the base. You just have to turn a new stem and put a new wine glass in it. So that's I've done that before for a friend of mine. So, and then I mean, you can put different accents in here. I mean, I did turn two that had a small bead in the middle, but to get them to look anyway, that was just too time consuming. But I do have the D-Way beading tools. I might give it a shot. Anything else?
Hey, when you do this introduction, do you do like sanding on the base, get all the bases out of the way, then you do the stem?
Yeah, that's what I do. Another thing on the stems, if you're doing it in a production mode, mark the way the thing went into the chuck. That way you can put it back in the same spot. Otherwise, it might run a little bit oblong. So usually what I will do is I'll turn them all around, drill them, and then come back and then start doing all the turning and finishing. And that's it. Actually, the bases take longer than the stems because you got to turn one face and then turn it around and do this. Then anyway, it's fun sometimes. So anyway, all right. You're welcome.